If you keep going back to doing the work, however much or little it is, you do the work. And that's the same in the gym. You're not going to do everything in a day, but if you do it consistently, you're going to see a difference.
Hey, this is Writers Row. I'm DC Wright-Hammer.
And I'm David Gane, and we have two special guests today.
I'm Trey Stone.
And I'm Maria Trey Stone's wife.
And if you like the content that we've been putting out, both on YouTube and on podcast, make sure to subscribe here, subscribe to the podcast. If you're on YouTube in this video, give this video a thumbs up and comment down below with any questions or comments.
And what are we talking about today, DC?
We wanted to bring Trey and Maria on the show, David, because there's a concept of what I like to call mind-body balance. Now, that's a very fluffy way of saying how do you balance doing things with your mind with doing things with your body to sort of keep those two things aligned. And we wanted to bring Trey and Maria on. They both are writers. They both exercise often. And so wanted to open this show with a question of how do you balance writing and exercise, balance the mind and the body, and what kind of benefits have you seen from doing that in sort of your writing careers?
Yeah, well, I've exercised often and a lot for a while now, but the last 6 months I've been doing it very regularly, near to almost every day, and I've noticed that the more I exercise, the more I write, in a sense. The more I do of one, the more I do of both. I feel like maybe that has to do with just getting into good habits, or maybe it's more about being active with physically active helps me being mentally active, because like you said, DC, writing can be very exhausting and draining, even though you're just kind of sitting there typing. And so I notice it's good to have that balance of when you've spent your mind, in a sense, to go do something physical and kind of, either get exercise or at least do something that makes you work your body as well. And I've noticed, because I used to spend a lot more time trying to write and less time exercising, which I think led to less writing actually being done. So now I do more of both, which is more exercising and a little less writing, but it's still more regular, which is awesome.
How about you, Maria?
Well, for me, exercise is kind of my free time. So I do a lot of writing. I like standing up when I write, and I wander around when I write. I do all kinds of crazy shit. But when I use my mind a lot and move my mind, like I call it, like you think and you plot and you have ideas and you write down, it gets to a point where you hit a wall, or you get exhausted, or you can't focus, or your words get blurred together. And that's kind of my cue to go do something else. I need a break. I need an actual break from my mind. And the only way I've found that works for me is to do something physical where you have to count the sets you're doing. You count the miles you're running. You count something. You do something very, very physical, very basic. And it could be some sort of other activity. It doesn't have to be at a gym. It doesn't have to be outside. It could just be in your living room. You could do yoga. You could do whatever you want. Go up and down your chair, but just doing something else and moving my body when I've moved my mind so much, if that makes any sense. So I try to kind of do that. I use the exercise as a way for me to have a break from all of the mind motion, and then I just do physical motion.
You said that you write while you're moving? How do you do that?
So I can write whilst walking. I've done it whilst running as well, but that gets a bit tricky depending on how fast you run. But I do it on my phone. I have done it on paper, but paper gets slippery if you get sweaty, so that's not a good idea.
Is this from experience that you?
Yeah, I did. And also it gets very I write like a child when I write by hand. And when you do that whilst running or walking, it gets even worse. So it's very hard to read afterwards. So I found the phone is quite easy to do it. But I've also actually recorded myself. So I have kind of been biking and actually writing stuff because I just say it out loud. People think it's kind of weird, I think, when they pass me.
And I've never written whilst running or cycling or anything, but I've written in the gym, between sets and stuff. I'll sit down to just
like
type
you'll
out something on my
note?
phone. No, I'll usually use a document on my phone. Either notes, but often, or sometimes at least, I've drafted stuff as well. If I have a scene in mind, then I suddenly feel like I need to write down.
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
just do that.
It's happened a million times. It's just, I'm just writing a scene.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have friends who do a lot of their writing like that, who sits down in between sets in the gym to get
You
it
don't
done.
have to sit down. You can do it standing
Yeah, or
up.
you could just stand it up if you want.
One thing that I would say, and this is really helpful for me as a science fiction thriller writer with many action scenes, is that you get out of, when you go and do physical activity, you get out of your head a little bit. And me as a writer, I try to be very observant. And so if I'm jogging on the treadmill, if I'm lifting weights, I think about how I'm feeling. Where's the pain of, where's the struggling? How is the human body really interacting? And so when I'm writing that next action scene, I have a few more adjectives in mind that actually will describe it a little more realistically. And I'm still trying to be like, you don't want to, just have a string of descriptors, but using the one or two descriptions that you do want to put in, I feel like I try to pull that from, when you're twisting your body, there's mirrors at my gym. What faces am I making when I'm really lifting heavy weights and things like that? And then I probably flex a little bit too, just for good measure. Yeah. But I think that's one of the ways I kind of do this mind-body balance thing is, if I'm just sitting at the keyboard for an hour or 2 hours or something like that trying to write, sometimes I get out of reality to some extent, and I'm just writing what kind of makes sense in the moment. And then if I get out of that scene and get into real life and start to see how, I am actually interacting with the world, and then I can come back and usually edit better, and then I'm writing better as a result of it.
I know I've actually stood up when writing to kind of not necessarily act out, but to like move around to understand how an action scene or like a fight scene would work. Like, where does this hand go? How does he move his upper body? Because that puts me in the right headspace in the sense to understand how, if there was a conflict, how two people would move.
The other question I had was, did I understand that sometimes when you guys are doing the exercise, you're using it to not think about the writing, to kind of just turn off your brain?
Yeah, especially for me. I think a lot and I have a lot of ideas. So for me, being in the gym or being outside or doing like some of that physical activity where you kind of like, if you're lifting very heavy weights and you have to count your sets, you have to count how many squats you're doing, or if you're doing body weight stuff and you have to kind of like think about the motion, think about the technique, or think about something very basic in one sense, but that can be very challenging. You kind of take yourself out completely from your mental cycle of thoughts and ideas and things, and just think about this position you're holding, like holding a plank, for example, or something like that. And you just like, I gotta keep this going, and you count in your head or something. And you just, although you get exhausted in a physical way, your mind is kind of completely new again when you come back. Because
it's a good way to reboot if you're.
Yeah.
I think a lot of writers are familiar with kind of having too many thoughts going on or having too many things they're thinking of, trying to solve like a plot. Or
yeah, in one sense, it's kind of like sleeping. You know how people say that you should sleep on it, and then you just work through it in the night, or your mind or brain or whatever you want to call it, like just goes through the different scenarios in your head, and then you wake up and like, oh, that's what I wanted to do. And I think the exercise can do kind of the same thing, that you get out of your head literally and just use your body for a bit, no matter what it is, and then everything seems a bit clearer.
Yeah, and I often resolve things if I am wondering something about what I'm writing. I usually never sit down to just like think about what happens now in the book. I'll go do something else. And that might not be exercise. That could be playing the guitar or playing a video game, but usually often with exercise as well. Suddenly I'll know what to do, and then I'll have to stop and write it down. But then at least it's kind of sorted itself out.
But playing the guitar is kind of an activity as well.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, but it's not exercise in the same way.
I tend to do the go out for a walk. So I'll write for a while, usually come to that wall of whatever the question is, ask myself the question as I set out on my walk, and then 50 minutes later, when I come back, I usually have the answers. So the one thing I find is interesting is when I'm lifting weights, I can't, because I'm focusing too much on the other stuff, where I turn my brain on for the walking and turn my brain off for the weight.
Oh no, I have a friend who he would write while walking using speech to text software on his phone. And he said there were some words that the software couldn't pick up properly, but I think he said it was like 95% accurate. He would go out for a walk for 3 hours and then draft.
Yeah, my professor usually said that he called it the art of walking. And he would kind of say that when, he said it in different words, I can't remember, but he kind of said that when you move, your mind moves. So they work together. And for some people, when they walk around, they basically just make their mind move with the same kind of pace that their body does. And that can become like a habit or a muscle memory. So you don't have to kind of think about putting one foot in front of the other like you have to do with a heavy barbell or dumbbell or something like that. It's kind of like a meditation, just walking. I do that a lot.
Well, and when writers get into the zone, as we might call it, they don't think about putting one word in front of the other. They really think, just let me get this scene out, and it becomes almost like an out-of-body experience. The words are just kind of spilling onto the page. And I think that's really neat because you sort of lose time. I think that's the best time when you're writing, is when you lose time, and that you're writing this really neat scene and it's suddenly you look up and it's an hour later or 2 hours later and the scene's written. Maybe it's just a first draft, but it's still out there and you lost time. And I think that's also true for me when I go for a run, that, there are certain periods where it's difficult and I'm out of breath, but you hit a stride at a certain point where, I don't know if it's the second wind hits and you're just running, and suddenly the last 15 or 20 minutes are just gone. You're back to where you wanted to be, or you've reached the distance you want to run, and you're like, oh wow, that went really fast and it wasn't as bad as I thought. And I think what you can take from doing that with exercise is you can go back to writing, and if you can get in that zone, maybe you have to get over a scene, or maybe you have to skip a scene, but find the piece that you really want to get to, and then just let yourself write. Just get in word in front of word in front of word. And if it's first draft, don't worry about it making 100% sense. Just get it out. Just do it. In writing, something is always better than nothing. And in exercise or in doing physical activity of some kind, something is always better than nothing.
The thing that's important for me is the habit of doing. I'm not really for writing every day, unless that's what you want to do. Then by all means do it, because I think it's the habit that's important, whether that's every day or every other day or whatever it is. It's if you keep going back to doing the work, however much or little it is, you do the work. And that's the same in the gym. You're not going to do everything in a day, but if you do it consistently, you're going to see difference.
I think the other thing that is really good when you think about the habit of writing or the habit of exercise is a lot of people feel that it's hard work on either side. I think getting into that mindset of showing up and doing whatever it is can probably cross over if you can show up and lift the weights and you still think it sucks and do the same thing for writing. Because I know a lot of people will say, when does it get easier for writing? And a lot of the time it doesn't really. Like, you kind of have to sometimes struggle.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things with working out, at least lifting weights, is it never gets easier, because the stronger you get, the more weight you put on the bar. So you're always at the same level of difficulty in a sense. And I think that's might be similar in writing, that the better you get, then maybe you write better stuff that's going to feel more difficult to write, in a sense. So you learn more, but you also have more to give. You have more output, in a sense. So it's never going to feel easier, but it's going to be better at some point. Just like you're going to get stronger in the gym, even if it's really heavy.
Now, Maria, you're a personal trainer.
Yes, amongst other things.
Do you apply the same similar rules to your writing as similar to working
My
out?
Exercise?
Yeah.
So I'm pretty much an all or nothing type of person. I don't do things in small batches. I go all in, and I think I do that both in writing and in exercise. Poor Trey sometimes, but I work out every day. That's not something I don't do the same amount every day, but I do something active every day because that works for me, and I try to write every day. It's not always good. Sometimes it's really bad, and sometimes it's really good. Although I know that art shouldn't be pushed, I think there is something to be said for like the habit and the keeping it going and making it a part of my life. It's not just like exercise for me, as writing for me, it's not just something I do, it's part of who I am, and I made it into my everyday type of lifestyle. So I write and I do exercise, and they kind of, so I do, it flows into each other quite a bit, I think. But I do the same type of thing. I try to almost have programs for writing. Sometimes I have almost supersets or sessions of just drawing up ideas, or just writing hard text, or just maybe just like dreaming and talking about it, and doing conversational stuff. So I do kind of change it up, as I do with my training. Try to be creative in both areas.
I want to kind of go on a bit of a tangent, but it's definitely related. I have actually found that cooking and writing are very similar, or at least in my head they are. And I will write my plot for whatever story I'm writing, and I will follow it. But as I go along, I'm fine-tuning it, I'm changing it, and so I kind of go back and forth, that the plot and story that I end up writing kind of reinforce each other, change each other, move forward. And when I'm cooking, I was baking bread the other day that I followed a recipe for the most part, but it called for an extra half cup of flour. But by the time I got to the point where I needed to add that half cup of flour, I'm like, I think this is ready to go. And I turned it out and I started kneading it, and sure enough, it was fine. But then I went back to go to writing, and I'm like, oh, okay, so yeah, I have this plot, and that's great, but I'm in this scene and I'm kind of stuck. And so I didn't let the plot or the recipe handcuff me or prescribe what I need to write. I let it sort of reinforce it. And then the exercise part, why this is tangential, when I was kneading the dough, this is where all my head was like going, and kneading for 8 to 10 minutes is actually a very exhausting thing, because it was a good dough. It was a very dense dough. That's another way of getting up and doing something active. And what's nice with baking bread is you make the dough, it has to rise. You have to punch it down, you have to shape it, then you got to let it rise again, and then you got to come back and bake it. And so there was sort of this cool little back and forth where I could do a little bit of writing, get up, do something with the bread, come back, do a little writing. Again, that's writing and cooking, but it's also writing and just getting out of my head for a second, applying it in a different area. It was sort of physical, and because I'm working the dough and I'm working the story in my head. And so I thought that was really neat. I wanted to kind of mention that here.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense to me, that it's a very similar thing, whether it's writing or an exercise of writing and cooking, or writing or anything else. It's writing isn't that different from a lot of other things that we do, even though it appears very different in the sense that it's such a mental activity. And I think that's an important thing to acknowledge. That kind of opens new doors for your writing, to kind of see it in different lights, in a sense.
Yeah, and I think it touches on another point as well, because you said how it is an activity, but you're not kind of in the gym. This correlates to writing, definitely. They're so caught up with having to write, I have to write 15 pages by this and this time, or I have to do such and such, or I have to have this program in the gym, I have to lift 100 kilos, I have to do this and this. And a lot of the time it's just about moving, nothing more. Just move. Just don't think about the rules. Don't think about all of the crap. Don't think about the girl in the tights or the guy in the tank top or whatever. Just do you. Just play around with it. Just have fun. And it's the same with writing, I think. Especially for me, some of the time I get very caught up with the fact that I should have done it this way. These people are doing it this way. And you kind of forget this fun, creative thing you can do with both writing and exercise and activity. You're allowed to play around. Just write some words. Who says that you need to have commas or something? I know you need to have commas, but you get my drift. Like,
who needs periods and commas and words?
Tell that to
words are quite important, to be fair.
Yeah.
Well, and I used to beat myself up. I'd go to the gym and I'd have this goal in mind, and I wouldn't hit my goal at the gym, and I would leave with sunken shoulders, feeling like it was a failure. And this year was really the first year where I said, if I'm leaving the gym, it means I went to the gym, and it means it's good, and I need to leave whatever I did at the gym there. And I think that applies to writing too. You might sit down and say, okay, I got to crank out 2 or 3 pages. And you might get there and you get 200 words in and you're like, I can't do this right now. You opened the story. You thought about it. You put down a couple of words, whatever they are. And if you have to turn it off, that door is shutting behind you. You feel good that you should take credit for what you've done. And you've put yourself in a better position the next time you go to do that, whether it's writing or going to the gym. You did something, you got there. I mean, yeah, if you walk to the gym, you open the door, and then you leave, okay. But still, you at least had that internal struggle. You fought over it, and there's a little bit of change that occurred there, regardless of how productive you might have been.
There's actually an exercise for people who are trying to build habits, which is I think it's called like the 2-minute exercise, where you do that first activity that it takes 2 minutes to do, right? So if you want to run, the first thing you have to do is get your shoes on. And that is usually the biggest hurdle for a lot of people trying to build a solid habit, is you have to do that one thing that's starting to commit to doing the activity. For me, usually it's putting on my gym clothes. Once I've done my gym clothes, the next thing is get under the bar. And once I've done that, I commit to the rest of the workout. And I think even just showing up at the page and saying, okay, I got to put the pen to the paper or type for 2 minutes. And if you can do that as a way to build habits, whether you're writing or you're working out or whatever, that's the way to do it. The other thing I wanted to touch upon is that, and I don't even know if it's kind of looked down upon, the idea that we all have different types of learning, and that idea of kinetic learning.
Kinesthetic, I think, is the word you're looking for, David.
Yeah.
That's
and
right.
I don't even know if it's actually accurate or true, but.
Well, yeah, I actually was an engineering teacher in a previous life, and I would often put things in kids' hands, and that was part of learning, is feeling it, exploring it, and that kind of gets back to the point I was making earlier, of feeling and exploring your body, yourself, the world, and that can reinforce what you do on the page, I think, in a lot of ways. And so, all right, great discussion, everyone. We really appreciate that. Now's the time when we're going to move on to promotions of some kind. We could do self-promotions or otherwise, and we like to let our guest lead in.
All right. Well, then I'll start with, I have 2 things to promote, because you two do wonders for the writing community with this show, this series. I haven't watched all of the shows yet, but I plan to do it. But I love it. It's good to see what other people experience, what people think about how this writing thing works, and it's a great place to learn and kind of just hear what other people think. So I want to promote your books. This is DC's. Between Two Minds, which everyone should read. So I'll put it over here. I have the paperback, which is a beautiful book. It's also brilliantly written, even if I can't pronounce that. Everyone should read this if they like sci-fi. I loved it. And then I do not have the paperback of David's book, Andrew Cunio's and David Gane, your Shepherd and Wolf mystery series, which I have your second book on my phone, on my broken phone.
Nice.
And I read the first one, which is also brilliant. And it's a beautiful paperback. I really liked the way it was designed.
It is.
I remember it as a very pretty book. Yeah. And I think...
Thank you very much. I like everyone it's a pretty book for a serial killer story.
Yeah.
Well,
and I haven't read the second one yet, but I'm looking forward to reading both of your second books. And I just think that since you two are hosting this series for all of the writing community and anyone else who watches, they should also read your books, definitely.
Well, thank you very much.
And I totally agree, but I also just really want to say that Trey Stone's A Consequence of Loyalty is also a very good book.
And where's your copy of that?
My copy of that is at home.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I also have it on my phone, but it's a very good book, although I'm biased.
How about you, DC? Do you have anything you want to promote?
I will promote, let's go with the podcast. If you haven't listened to just the audio of our shows on podcast, you could take us with you. Those episodes get delivered right to your mobile device. So if you follow us, we're on Spotify, Apple, Google, a lot of different places. So yeah, follow our podcast, and then you can hear us yap in your ear wherever you go.
I actually want to promote the Twitter writing community. That's how I met all 3 of these wonderful people. And so if you've come to YouTube and discovered us on just YouTube, but have not been a part of the writing community, and you are a writer, I highly suggest you follow everyone, start searching #writing community, get a part of the discussions. A lot of it's being silly and having fun and supporting each other, though. All three of you guys I stumbled across through Twitter, and you guys are so amazing. So
thank you.
Thank you all. And we appreciate everybody sticking around. We appreciate Trey and Maria coming on with a 7-hour time difference. So thanks for that. And we'll catch everyone next time.